Hello everyone. Part 2. Welcome back to Lisa the tutorial. Last time we went over a lot of stuff, and since that last video I've actually added some new things to this map that we can discuss, including ropes, event locations, and how to alter common events if we don't get our initial desired result. But before we get started with that, we're going to start off by talking about scripts, which is something I briefly mentioned at the probably midpoint of the last tutorial video. Scripts are the external functions that we bring into RPG Maker to allow us to do the cool things that we saw in Lisa the Painful. As you can see here, we have a wide array of differently titled scripts that we have at our disposal, and looking through each of them, they have their own specific function. I'm not going to go over any of them here, but I definitely would recommend you look at these yourself and understand what each of their functions are. I'd also recommend that you take the time to learn how to actually import scripts into RPG Maker. It's actually very simple. If you were, say, to select an entire script, copy it, and then paste it into the program, you'd have your script put in. It's very straightforward. I've linked in the description a website known as the RPG Maker script repository. It's simply a little location on github.com. It's perfectly safe to go to, where you can pick up all scripts, both popular and lost to time. Some of them are from websites that are no longer available to access or unsafe to access. So it's a great way to find scripts that you may have heard about on the forums from 2013 that were, again, lost to time, that you can now access and play around with. It's very easy to use the website, and you can even keyword search for portions of the script that you desire to have in your game, and most of them, like these scripts that I'm showing you right now, will have headers and paragraphs detailing what their functions are, helping you to quickly identify what scripts you want. Now, I would definitely say for the scripts that I've been showing off here very briefly, you should know these more than any other scripts. The rest are just adding cool new functions. The reason is that these scripts are predominantly what makes Lisa, Lisa. And when I say that, I mean that without these scripts, we would lose a lot of functionality that you're probably used to in every single Lisa fan game, and in Lisa the Painful, Lisa the Joyful. So understanding these scripts are really important. I would definitely say more than anything else, the Battler Motion, the Yanfly core engines, both the regular and the battle engine, the Yami engine, as well as command list, combo, anti-fail message, the message options, character and region effects, the party system, options and battle results, also known as the victory aftermath, title screen, full screen, and things like these class level keeps and character control. The rest are a bit negotiable, I would say. Some I'd definitely, again, recommend that you go look through them. And I know I said most of them, but I think I left out about like 8 or 9 of them on this list. And there are usually a lot more in most other Lisa fan games. So really what I'm saying is the ones that I talked about, you should know, because those give you things like cool battle animations. They allow you to change your character's sprites without any errors or with without lag. And they allow you to do things like the text box, which are commonplace in Lisa games. So it's really important that you get a good comprehension of all those things, especially since you'll be working with this probably for the entire game, or time that you're developing your game, I should say. So I'm going to pull up a graphic really quick, because I think this is really important that you see. Okay. please follow all the instructions that I've put here. It's really important that you do. I'll read it to you. You should only reach out for help with scripts or script-related issues after you've already installed the script correctly. This means that you copy-pasted it. You made sure you copy the whole thing, because if you copy only portions of it, it won't work. You've read how to use this carefully, and then you've actually used it as it's been told to you to use it. And then you've also checked to make sure that you haven't already installed it once or even twice, because if that happens, you'll get a stack flow error and your game won't launch. So make sure that you've done all of this correctly, and don't just lie, or don't just say, oh, I just glanced at it. Make sure you've gone and thoroughly make sure that this is not working, because the issue is that usually there's very simple solutions for things that you've done incorrectly, and just taking the time to understand what they are will help you to expedite with serious troubleshooting down the line. You don't want to fumble with the easiest stuff, because just importing and playing around with scripts is what I would consider the easiest part of using RPG Maker. So don't louse this up. Once you've crossed that threshold, you can reach out to me, but you can also go to any one of these websites that I've linked in the description. You can go there and see forums. You can actually cross-check here and see if the scripts that you're using are actually broken, and if there are fixes that remedy your situation. So go there first, go through the list, and then check out these sites. Make sure things aren't already, busted, or there aren't already existing fixes. Once you've done that, you can come to me and ask for questions for help. Now, if you just have questions like, oh, how should I most effectively use this? You'll have to come up with an example of what you're trying to do with the script, and I'll tell you if I think it's possible to do it or not. Usually it is, if, the script is versatile enough. But really, don't come to me if you're having troubles with, installation or usage. Only come to me if you're confused on, what's the best course of action to go about using it. If you happen to exhaust all your options and you come to me and you've done all these things, my advice will usually be either, I'll try and examine it and see if there's anything we can fix, but I'm no expert in this sort of stuff. So my next advice would probably be, find a substitute. And I know sometimes the unfortunate thing about RPG Maker scripts is that there are tons and tons of duplicates of scripts that are, very easy to come by, and then there are no duplicates of scripts that are really, really specific that you really want to use. Now that happens sometimes, and it's really unfortunate, but you'll have to find workarounds. And with RPG Maker, it's actually not that bad. But yeah, that will probably be my advice if you get to that point. Okay, now we're done with scripts. I'll say one last piece about playing with the game's code. Unless you know how to work with Ruby, don't play with the code. If you don't know what that means you shouldn't be touching the base code whatsoever. But for your information, Ruby is the code that's used to write this program, and it's very important that you do recognize that even the slightest alterations to base code can make the game virtually unplayable. And if you don't record down what you change, or you don't, if you try and shotgun debug everything, you're going to end up creating a huge mess, and it'll be impossible for you to salvage stuff. So my advice is make backups of everything, but most importantly, do not play with the background code or the base code. Because if you try to do that, you're going to be really sorry that you did, and it'll be a mess to try and fix it. And it won't be worth it either, because usually there are scripts that will allow you to do the same without having to permanently hard code in things that you want. So my advice is play it safe, use scripts, don't play with the base code. And that's important because, again, a lot of times, people get very dead set in trying to fix something, and they just Control F in the scripts, and they're like, oh, let me find this, so I remove this, this gets me what I want. No, actually, it won't, and you'll break your game. So don't do that. Okay, let's get started with how to do ropes. That's the first thing I'm going to show off in this video. So ropes are actually pretty simple, but we'll need to do a few things to achieve rope changes. So you'll notice that on these ropes, there are actually no events. You'll be thinking, well, hang on, when I climb onto ropes, isn't my sprite supposed to change? Well, yeah. The way that this is achieved is at the start of the game, there is a switch known as the rope switch that's turned on. And if you remember from last time, switches are one time, or not one time, but they're defined blocks, I'll call them, that you turn on and off that allow you to achieve changes in your game. Variables are a little bit different. You have to cross thresholds or, get numbers exactly, but switches are just, you put the block down, the changes are immediate. So here, by turning rope on, we've activated a common event, which we can travel to over here, known as the rope common event. Now, this is a parallel process, which means throughout the entirety of the game, this will be running. And we need this to be the case, because if we just leave this as auto run, it's going to freeze up the game. And if we leave it as none, it won't work. It will just simply not do anything. Not because none means it never works. It means that it will happen one time, and if we're not meeting these conditions, it won't happen. Like, none is for when we're having a one-and-done situation, where, say, for example, like, we pick up a bottle, you see here, plays a sound effect, does the thing, get a bottle. This says none. This is a one-and-done situation. So how does the rope common event work? Well, it does two things. Actually, multiple things. But the most important things is it checks your X and Y coordinates. And what that does is it then checks to see what is the terrain tag of your area. Now, when you put a specific tile onto your map, if you go into your tile sets, you can actually see that you can click this thing called terrain tag and give your terrain a very specific number. Excuse me. This can go up to 7. And if we go back to our common event, I don't know why I keep closing out, excuse me. You can see that if we actually sync up our variables and check the terrain tag of where the player is currently located, we can actually, if we set up our tile sets such that, let me find snow really quick. A4 Alt, okay. So if we go and find our actual ropes, you'll see that they have 2 as their terrain tag. So when that is the case, when 2 is the terrain tag based on our X and Y variables, we change to our appropriate rope animation, which is what we want. And that's all this is doing. This is just saying, okay, where's the player on the map? Does this place on the map have a specific number? If it has the specific number, change the sprite. Now, I haven't seen people found a creative way to use this other than ropes, but maybe you can come up with an idea that's unique. So when you reach the top, you're going to have an event that has to change the character back to normal. Because, here's the thing. While the parallel process does change your character sprite on the terrain tag, it's not like you would think inherently, oh, maybe when you're not on that tile, it reverts back. Actually, no. You have to do the reversion by yourself. So when you're done with this whole business, that is, you've reached the top or bottom of the rope, you need to change your graphics back to normal. The way we do that is just have it such that the character is either facing up or down, and whoever it is, they're going to change their graphics accordingly back to normal. So let's see how that would look in game. See? Works like a charm. And we can go as many times as we want up and down, and it's working as intended. We're on the rope, we have the different sprite, get to the top, we're back to normal. Back to normal. Hooray. So that's how ropes work. You can make them as long as you want, but the most important thing is that you remember to put your terrain tag on, and you remember that you have your parallel process running in the background. That's how you do ropes. Pretty straightforward. Also make sure that your graphics return to normal at the top or bottom of the rope. That's all there has to be said. How about that? Now, let's do a little bit of quandary solving here. What happens if, on a rope tile, we also want there to be jumping? Well, that's actually pretty simple. We're going to do what's called a move event. And what that is we're going to use our handy-dandy events to summon something which is called set event location. And what this does is we just set the location of a different event. We can even set the location of an event in question like that we're using. We can choose this to be this event itself. But you usually don't want to do that because this should just be its own separate thing that does its own processes in the corner. You don't want to usually use this event unless you really have a specific reason for doing that. It's also good for organization's sake too. So we have this event. I just called it the magic. I don't know why, but it allows you to jump down. And what I did is I put this next to this event, and I set it so that the magic event, not the common event, would be moved, if you directly designate it, to the bottom of the rope. You can even enlarge this, but I would actually recommend you keep it a little small when you're working with larger maps, so you can see the scope of the whole thing. When you're working with smaller maps like this is fine. But yeah, we have it right. Direction doesn't matter unless you're working with an event that has a specific sprite. We don't have any sprites on this, so that's irrelevant to us. So now, actually, let's test it out and see. We have our little parallel process in the background. It's set up our event, so when we reach the bottom of the rope, we can jump down. Nice. Cool. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, what was the point of that? Because couldn't I just put something on the rope already? You could. The reason is there's an event touch that has to be activated in order for the player's sprite to be returned to normal. So you'll have to do multiple event overlays if you want more things to be achieved on a single tile. There are scripts that also let you do this a little more cleanly, but if you're not going to bother with adding scripts like that, I would definitely say know how to do this technique if you're trying to do something where it's a bit tight in one region. That's all I have to say on that. So last time, if you remember, we had an interesting little situation where when we were playing with Boat Boy, because I copied from the wrong map, he would have the wind animation. And the way we solved that is simply by going into our common event and changing the sprites correctly to the ones we wanted. This is not the hair flowing one, it's simply the dash sprite. And it returns back to normal, which is just this money sign 1 graphic. Now you might have said to yourself last time, why would we make common events for each and every thing if I could just copy paste the event over and over again? That works if you're just wanting to quickly edit the event and get the exact numerical values you want quickly. But the problem with that is if you get a bug like what we had last time, you'd have to go individually and delete every single event piece by piece by hand to get your desired result and replace it with the correct ones. The reason why you want to use common events is because when you make a mistake, you just have to fix it here, and it will apply across the board to every single event that calls the common event. Common events are great for organization, and they keep things simple. If you want to make it more difficult for yourself, you're more than welcome to go and make them all individualized. But trust me when I say using common events to do things like movement and such is a really good strategy. We could even do this for ropes, honestly. In terms of the restoring back to normal situation. But for now, I'll just say that I would really recommend you get some comprehension on how to use these common events. So like if I wanted to have like let me show you, a common event that is just like rope top. Just have that there. Copy this, and I'm just going to set this up that it calls the common event known as rope top. There we go. There's that. And then we're going to copy this, call the next common event, leave it blank for now because obviously we're going to rush in there in just a moment, and put this as robot. Now all you have to do is click call the common event, and if we have any bugs, we just go to the single box where we have everything checked out, and you can constantly cross-reference other things you've worked with before, which makes this an even better decision to do. So common events, just a really good thing to know how to use, especially as you get more and more into denser parts of game development. Now we're going to go into some database stuff. You've probably seen all this stuff before if you've been playing around with RPG Maker. You've gone through and you've seen everything. How do you use this all? You might be wondering. How do you actually get around to using all this stuff? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward. There are things called actors, and actors are your actual characters that you're going to be playing around with. And each of these actors are going to have their own unique class, levels, and all their different different perks and such. Now, while I like Lisa the Hopeful, I'm not a fan of this huge wall of of stuff here. Especially since it just doesn't look too organized, and it's not very obvious to the player, I would say. But, I mean, it works for what it does, I'll say. You can also see that you have equipment and such, and there's also these things like quotes. That comes with scripts. You can't do this in normal RPG Maker. You'll need to get scripts in order to accomplish that, but that's one of the Victory Aftermath script. That's how you unlock kill text or item text or level up text. You have levels and respective skills, what you get at these levels, and you have all the different parameters that you'll have to set up for each and every character. There are also these different things called parameters that you'll have to take into account. TGR is target rate. Hit is hit rate. Evasion is, well, EVA is evasion, and crit is critical hits. And for each character, they're slightly varied. So, for most characters, you have a 1% chance of getting a critical hit. You have a 10% chance, or 5 or 1% chance of evading something. Some characters have a 100% hit rate, while others have a 95% hit rate. And most have a 90 to 100 target rate, which means that when an enemy is attacking, the higher your target rate is, the more likely they'll single you out. Excuse me. And hit rate just refers to how often you're going to land a hit. Now, in addition to hit rate, you also have what's called the success rate. And success rate basically is how likely it is an attack will succeed. So you're going to have to multiply your hit rates times your attack rates, which is why I usually say that, in my honest view, you should really try and keep your hit rates at 100% and keep the success rates at a lower rate. Because you don't want to give a character like a 90% success rate, or sorry, a 90% hit rate, and then like a 60% success rate on an ability, because that ability is very unlikely to land. You're already multiplying 90 by 60. It's just not preferable at all. Like about 54%. Not fun. So make sure you really you're very much careful when you're setting things up. I would, again, definitely recommend that if you're going to give anything a chance to not work, have it be that either one or the other. The hit rate is lower, but success rates are consistent across the board, or success rate is lower, but hit rate is consistent across the board. Here are items. This is very straightforward. You should know how to use these after like looking at this for a few seconds. You'll have an animation, a healing effect, all these different things. Something you should know is, I think this goes without saying, but you should have 100% success rate on every single item that you use. You do not want to be in a situation where you give like a 95% chance of success to like a health item and have it fail in a fight. That would be horrific. So make sure that you're very much conscious of that when you're programming that. I'll leave you to figure out the rest of these things. These are very straightforward, and again, you should really just take the time and learn how to use these yourself by just reading them, examining them, altering them slightly, and then checking them out in the troops tool, which we've gone over, I think, already twice now in a video. So, yeah, you should really, in my opinion, get an understanding of these just by practice. Same thing with going into terms. You can change things like attack, defense, the names of all these things. You can change all of your elements, weapon types, and everything. But when you're doing this, remind yourself that you need to keep it organized, keep it consistent, and keep it clean, because the more difficult you make it for yourself down the line, the harder it's going to be to clean up later on. That's all I wanted to talk about in terms of databases. Let's now talk about status effects. Status effects, I probably have mentioned once or twice, but they are pretty much what makes Lisa Lisa. Everyone who's played Lisa knows that there's like a dearth of status effects to work with. And these, again, I'll briefly go over about 10, 15 of them, so you get the idea of what they do. So like here, poison. This reduces your health regeneration. You can see if you hover over this, this will show you what these acronyms stand for. And you can see that there's a duration of turns, but this can also be removed by stepping around. This shows you that when you become poisoned, there's terms, there's a phrase that's produced when that happens, and when you're removed of poison, this is said. I would recommend that you also have a state remains thing, unless you have a mechanic that you're going to introduce that shows that a character is still under the influence of a status effect. I would definitely recommend that, because if otherwise, what's going to end up happening is, the player might be like, oh, what's still going on, when like 4 or 5 status effects have been tacked on, and you don't know what's happening at that point. Organization is good. Blind reduces your hit rate. So this doesn't affect your success rate, but directly, I should say. But it does affect your hit rate, which factors into your success rate. So it's an indirect affection of the success rate, which allows your abilities to happen. And you should know, when you get blinded, things land, less frequently. Confusion. This is a little changed from other Lisa games where you can attack anyone. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misremembering. But confusion can be removed by damage half of the time. It goes away at the end of the battle. That's why you click this switch. Not going to worry about remove by restriction because no one really uses that. But attack an ally just means that you're going to attack a friend. Your stun locks just prevent you from moving. But also, sometimes you might want to recreate a status effect and give it new properties. Scared, unlike in previous Lisa titles, doesn't actually stun lock you. It simply locks what you're able to do, and it actually gives you a slightly greater chance of being targeted. Alive is, I think, something I briefly mentioned in the last one. It's a status effect that prevents you from being KO'd. It's really important that you have this because otherwise you can't have cutscenes in a fight. Cover is not something that's really used. Rage raises your crit rate. Hide raises your evasion. Lowers your target rate. Intimidated is the status effect Beltboy has that basically serves as the new Scared in this game. Targeted lowers enemy defenses. That's Rodriguez's status effect. Yeah. Again, I would go through these yourself. These are not hard to understand, and you can do all sorts of cool things with them. You You can even, there's a lot of stuff that's usually not shown, but you can change the rate at which you're going to be debuffed. You can make it such that a player, if they have like normal attacks, they can have a different attack element type, so they deal more damage. That could be like a mechanic that you introduce into your game. You can raise the number of times an attack lands based on this. You can give players new skills or limit the amount of skills they have. You can allow them to equip certain things temporarily. You can force them to be equipped to certain things, or force them to become dual-wield characters. You can give them the ability to attack twice. That's different from a skill landing twice. I know that's a little confusing. This just means that when you do like a punch, the punch lands twice. Attack times means you can do a punch and a guard in the same turn. Special flags, auto battle, you attack automatically without input. Guard, it's like guarding. Substitute, you substitute yourself for another character, so they take damage instead of another person. Preserve TP means TP is saved for the next battle. Collapse effect, party abilities, these are pretty straightforward. So again, this is sort of stuff that you should like just play around with and get a good understanding, because me explaining it to you, you'll probably receive about half of it, and then that'll be it, and it'll kind of go one ear, one out. Even if you're paying attention, I definitely recommend you play around it yourself, because when you have it in your own head, when you need to call on that knowledge, it's not like, oh, what did he say? Did he say to do this or that? You should just know, you know, I remember how to use this mechanic in RPG Maker. Let me do this correctly again. So, yeah, I know I kind of rambled through a lot of that, but that's really because most of the database is just stuff that you need to learn how to use yourself, and that's it. Okay, now we're going to go into skills. Even though we just did the database stuff, I'm going to talk a little bit about skills and what you should do. This is more advice more than anything, because as I said before in the previous section, you know, you should really be playing around with stuff yourself. Like learning how to do damage and all these things. Just study these things and edit them slightly to get what you want. You can set your elements, chances of crits, or not chances of crits, but you can set if it can crit or not. You can force a weapon to be used in order for a skill to be available, etc., etc., etc. Let's talk about a few things that that you should know. Firstly, there are 3 types of hits: certain hits, physical hits, and magic hits. Physical hits rely on your hit rate to land, and they actually will they can miss. Certain hits will always land even if a player has like a 0% hit rate chance. A magic attack, I'll read it from you here, it's slightly different because it's based on not hit rate, but I believe it's just based on success rate. No, it's based on target's magic evasion rate. So this one is a little bit unusual. I really wouldn't recommend using magic attack. Even if your character uses magic, physical attack is the way to go. It's a bit deceptive if you ask me. But certain hits should be for things like stances or abilities that inflict status effects. Because if it doesn't land your status effect, you've just wasted a turn effectively. So you really, certain hits should be non-attack abilities. Additionally, when you're balancing your game, while I do like Lisa the Painful style of having like a huge amount of characters, I definitely think the best way to go is to make sure that each character has their own specific niche to fill. And that doesn't mean that, like, oh, there's one healer, there's one damage, there's one this, there's one that. It's like, no. What you really want to make sure is that you have characters that fill specific roles that a player might be inclined to use in a game. If you just give all the characters like similarly balanced moves, or you don't give them more specific reasons for being like used over another character, you'll never see play for that character, and you'll either have to buff the heck out of them or nerf the already existing strong characters, and usually the latter is not something you want to do. It might annoy your players. So it's just not favorable. Make sure when you're like setting up your characters, excuse me, you're combining both your story and your gameplay elements by really both giving them a thematically appropriate kit to play with, as well as moves that are distinct enough that they aren't interchangeable with another character, or if they are, they serve as a decent side grade to that other character that makes it worth using in lieu of the initial character. So that's really all I have to say. It's skills. I'll briefly mention buffs and debuffs. They're not really used, at least in the hopeful, but if you've played the Desolate Expanse mod, they're used quite a lot. So I'll briefly talk about buffs. So buffs alter stats of characters over the course of a predetermined set of turns. And you can set as many turns as you like, or as few turns. You can set it even for 9999, 1,000 turns. And I mean, like, that's basically permanent for the fight. When you do this, it increases the amount of your stat by 25%. And you can add these together to increase it by 100% or 200% or how many ever times you want. It's up to you. But it's important to know that this is only in 25% increments, so you can't do any weird things. You'd have to use status effects if you want a specific amount. And the only way to get rid of buffs is to wait the time out, or for you to remove buffs to whatever you've determined with another skill. Now, you only have to use one remove buff or one remove debuff. You don't have to use like as many of these. You just have to use one and remove all of the buffs. So when you're doing this, make sure you're very careful, because if your character already has a very large amount of something and you give it a 100% increase, that's going to be very strong. So use your buffs and debuffs litigiously. Like on the flip side of the coin, if you have a character that already has like a low health pool, and then you give them like an enemy an ability to lower your max health for like by 50%, I mean, that person's probably going to get taken out in the next round. So buffs and debuffs are very helpful, but you got to use them effectively as effectively as possible. Now, also know that if anyone gets a little spooked, it's like, oh, but what if it creates like 4 power pop-ups of plus attack? It won't do that. It will sum all the different components of the buff into one final result, which will be 1 just plus attack. So it's going to be on you in your item or your attack description to really explain to the player the effect of that move if they have the ability to inflict buffs or remove debuffs. The enemy, I would definitely recommend that you have a consistent way of the enemy altering the player's stats, because if it's inconsistent, it's going to be really hard for them to really deal with buffs and debuffs. Okay, that's all on that. Last thing, cutscenes. How do you do cutscenes? Well, and the last time we talked about how when you rock up to a character, you can summon text. But we're actually going to go back in time. I'm not going to set up a thing for this. I initially wanted to, but I'm going to just show you the Gordy Golden sequence and just show you how it works, and we'll just revisit this, and then we'll go through the code and explain it all. Okay. Now let's go and actually examine how that was possible. So, first, the player walks into the room. The background music is slowly faded out, but it's saved first. So what Save BGM is, it's pretty straightforward. It just saves the point in the background music. It's faded out, and after the fight ends, it's going to be replayed. the player will walk in, and the game will wait appropriately before text starts. We have a wait function. Dialogue is displayed. We wait again. And now we have our first appearance of Lynx and Cyclops in this scene. First, you'll note that it says fade out for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why, because there's nothing there, but Lynx and Cyclops are... Oh, excuse me. So it's faded out for this reason because when we turn on the Lynx and Cyclops into behind us, so to speak, we want them not to appear. Well, there's a different way of doing this. I'm not sure why they chose to do fade out first. I'm pretty sure you can change opacity beforehand, but anyway, they're going to be facing right, and then they're going to be fading in. And now you'll have this, which is part of the ATS messaging text, which gives Beltboy his own unique text noise. And he'll say this line. There'll be a response. There'll be Lynx's unique sound noise. So this will be how you do it. You'll have like the sound effect, and the pitch is going to be randomized between these two numbers. Talks, response. And now here's where the cool part of this scene happens, where Gordy jumps into the air. Firstly, we're going to have the map scroll up to meet him, and then he is going to have his walking animation and direction fix on. So what that means is he's not going to be, when he jumps up into the air, he's going to hold his position. He's not going to change position because he's jumping. In addition to that, direction fix means he's going to keep facing us in the same direction as we saw him, as he faces us, like from right to left. If direction fix wasn't on, we'd have some weird bug where, well, actually, here, let me just show you what that would look like if we take that out. So as you can see, not what we want. So we have to keep that there to keep things working as intended. There's also an animation that shows after the fact. The sparkle, I think you probably know it from Vega Van Dam's fight. There's text, and then music change, and then the fight starts. Now obviously we have to check for pain mode because Gordy Golden has a Shane Steele show up in the fight if this is pain mode on. And then at the end, we have Gordy fall to the floor. Again, with direction fix and everything still on. Crashes down and then fades out. You also have animations for all the glass windows breaking. Explosion noise. A shake, which is what you see after the fight has been won. The characters all jump around at the same time. That's why there's no wait. I should say it doesn't wait for them to finish. There are waits in these individualized move routes, but all of them are taking place at the same time. And then this comes to an end. So this is really how you do a cutscene. You have to be paying attention to the timing of everything, make sure it's not too fast, not too slow. And really just get creative with like the different things that you're able to do. It's a coordination of a lot of stuff at once, and obviously this is just one cutscene, but it really shows you a lot of important things that you need to be cognizant of when you're playing around with RPG Maker and trying to accomplish things. Because it's easy just to be like, oh, just have text and stuff and do a fight, but taking this extra step to make stuff really pop off and look cool, that's important. So yeah, make sure that you like, I would definitely open up your RPG Maker decryptors if you have them. You can Google and find one, and play through and see how are these all of these things accomplishable. All right. I know this was not as informative as the last one. There's a lot fewer tutorial elements in this one, but it's really because the initial stuff was things that I personally feel that should be not as obvious, or they're not really that obvious when it's working with this program. But the stuff here is a lot more clear cut and concise. I'm going to be making a Lisa Discord of sorts where you can ask questions about making games and such. I'm no expert in making music or art, but I can try and help you if you have questions on that too. But yeah, that's going to pretty much wrap it up for this Lisa the tutorial video. Leave a comment below if you have anything in specific you would like to see next time. But I think for the next video, I'm really going to be talking more about what you should be aiming to do in a Lisa fan game instead of just tutorial stuff. But yeah, that's going to be it. Thanks for tuning in again.